Welcome everybody, really excited to see you here. We have a great presentation for you today. As one of the 200 veterinarians and technicians for HILLS, we're very pleased and honored to be able to support those organizations that support our profession. And the ACVIM is just that organization. If you've not had a chance to interact with any of the leaders at the college, I encourage you to do so. You've got a great set of leaders for ACVIM. You know, as we grow up, we have a great profession. We all, as we are growing, we strive to do things that, would make us proud, and, whether it be being a fire person or a sports person, an athlete that wins the World Series. We all have these dreams that we strive for. And I remember growing up, I wanted to be a veterinary astronaut, and my mother told me, no, you can't be an astronaut. You're going to get hurt. And so I became a veterinarian, and I think I got hurt more being a veterinarian than probably about anything else. But it was something that we always strive for, and our speaker today was one that reached out to the stars, so to speak, poor metaphor, but reached out toward the stars and really accomplished something that many of us strive and wish we could do. We've got a great profession. There's so many things that we can do. I know a lot of us, when we get into veterinary medicine, you think you're going to be in a practice, and that's what veterinarians do, but there are so many opportunities for all of us. Dr. Richard Linnehan is a veterinarian, as we said. He graduated from The Ohio State University, and he was in private practice for a period as well after his graduation. Following a stint in private practice, he spent 2 years with an exotic animal internship, and then in the early 90s joined NASA. And he was, I believe, a captain in the Army Veterinary Corps when he joined NASA. In the mid-90s, Dr. Linnehan took his first trip into space aboard Columbia. And over the next 12 years, Dr. Linnehan took 4 trips aboard space shuttles into space. He had, I believe, 6 extravehicular walks, spacewalks, if you will. One of his trips was to repair the space telescope Hubble. He has spent nearly 2 months in space during his 4 trips, 3 aboard Columbia, 1 aboard Endeavour. His last flight was 2008 aboard Endeavour, the Space Shuttle Endeavour. He's still with NASA. We talked to him a little bit earlier, and he still holds a position with NASA. So I'm really pleased and really honored to be able to bring this speaker to you. Dr. Richard Linnehan is one of our colleagues. He is also an astronaut. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to a veterinary astronaut, Dr. Richard Linnehan.
Anyway, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, especially among my brethren. I don't get to hang out with veterinarians as much as I'd like anymore. And I thought about what I'd talk about this morning. How can I talk about veterinary medicine to a bunch of veterinarians who, are the pros? I haven't really been involved in it as much as I would like to be since my time at NASA, although I still do some consulting work, marine mammals and some exotics. So I decided it's like, instead of talking veterinary medicine, we're just going to have a little bit of an escapist program this morning. I'm going to show you what it's like to fly in space and train. And also at the end, if we have some time, I have about an 8-minute video of some things that were put together that I'd never seen before by a friend in Austin. It pretty much goes through the whole launch profile of a shuttle up into reentry, and then a lot of cool stuff. That's about 8 minutes. And since I've already busted the timeline already, I'm probably just going to blab. And if I run over, which I probably will, just feel free to get up and walk out. It won't be the first time that's happened. Okay, one of the things I'm really interested in on the veterinary side, talk about this a bit, is the One Health initiative. I just talked to Dan a bit about the role of veterinarians, how we see the role, what the role was when we were in vet school. I mean, back when I was there, it was hard for me even to get people interested in exotics and marine, and that was really what I was always interested in. My vision of the veterinary profession is that it's evolving, and I'm biased, I think all you are, but I can't think of another health profession that's more cross-cutting in terms of how it's trained and able to deal with a number of different problems than veterinarians. And I think in some ways we've pigeonholed ourselves, the profession, in terms of what we think we can do and what we're able to do. To give you an example, I see veterinary medicine with the One Health Initiative, as the AVMA One Health Initiative Task Force talked about in 2008, as a broad profession. I mean, we could go back to a Star Trek analogy. One day, we're probably going to be the planetary exobiologists, because we are trained better than any other profession in terms of, you could look at economics, herd health, you could look at epidemiology, environmental toxicology. It all comes together. And as you know, things are getting more and more complex in the world, the healthcare system, public health, animal health, and we need to look at the picture now, the issues, not from the classic maybe 100,000 foot level, but from the 100 nautical mile level. We need to be able to diagnose everything. Typically you can go in a siloed kind of situation where you identify one problem, you go in and we'll fix this from with what we know, our bailiwick, and go away, and 6 months later the problem's back. So it involves a lot of things going on. Macroeconomics, politics, of course, epidemiology, but I believe that's where veterinarians are headed. And the classic roles of veterinary medicine won't change. There'll still be small animal, large animal, people will practice, but I see an expanding role for us in world health in terms of CDC, epidemiology, and actually going in as almost environmental SWAT teams and fixing problems that other professions can't. And we have to be really active and vocal about why we're better. And I think that's part of where we're going to head as a profession. You can see the different organizations that are involved, all the schools. I couldn't put all the vet schools on here. A lot of schools I know that work in this area now in exotics and health, and all the other organizations that are involved in this One Health initiative. And I don't know if any of you know Billy Karish. He's a pretty famous zoo vet, but it's a great picture. This was in National Geographic. And I just kind of outlined what we talked about. Who else, if you can put someone out in an operational situation in the field, in a lab, as an administrator, I think, as I said, I'm biased, but I think we're better at it than most people. And a good friend, actually named Jeff Osofsky, sorry, the slides are cut off a little bit here towards the end, but there's something called the Health and Ecosystems Analysis of Linkages. It's run by a gentleman named Steve Osofsky, who's a veterinarian, and again, that's what they're looking at, integrated public health. It's a policy house. And I encourage, if you're interested, for you to check out HEAL and maybe get more involved or interested in that when you have some free time, which I know many of you probably don't have a lot of. So now we get into the meat of it. So the NASA meatball here. This is the classic symbol. This is what probably all of us saw when we grew up, except for the NASA worm, which is that old stylized guy that got put away a few years ago, and they brought back the classic meatball. Where did the space program come from? How are we all here? Why do we have a space program? Well, the original 7, the classic movie, if you ever saw The Right Stuff, came out when I was in vet school, I think in 1982. And I had something, like Dan mentioned, in terms of wanting to be an astronaut. You know, the thing I always wanted to do is be a veterinarian and or a pilot. And I actually had a good friend, Jim Harkey at Ohio State, who did that. He actually graduated from vet school and went into the Air Force National Guard and started flying F-16s. And so he turned out he was a PhD in bone metabolism, an F-16 driver, and a veterinarian. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I was too old. But I decided that, you know, again, with our backgrounds and our training, I looked at NASA and the early astronaut corps. This is a great picture of Apollo. I never saw one go off. I would have given my left arm to. Many of you may have if you lived in Florida in the early days, but this is one of the last moon mission shots. And of course, as veterinarians, why did I think we were qualified to be astronauts, or why should we? Well, you know, most people don't know this, but the early space program revolved around veterinarians and training of primates and other animals at Holloman Air Force Base. So any of you have heard of the famous chimps, Ham and Enos? Well, they were our first American astronauts before Shepard and Glenn. And if you talk to the trainers and the vets who were there with them, they said they did a better job. Okay, classic. This is our cruise shot. You know, you have to get the PR shots when you're out, you know, before you launch, and so everyone gets their poster. And you can see right here, every crew makes their own patch. You've got Dom Gorey, Navy fighter pilot, Greg Johnson, Air Force fighter pilot, and then the mission specialist. Garrett Reisman is now working for SpaceX. He was just down at the Dragon launch the other day. Takao Doi from Japan, Bob Benkin, myself, Mike Foreman, Navy guy. But everyone asks, what's the hardest part about flying in space? Is it training for EVAs? Is it the years and years of preparation and study that it took you to get there? Is it, figuring out shuttle systems? And that's all hard. And you all know what it's like because you went to vet school, as they say, drinking from a fire hose. But in fact, the hardest part about flying in space is getting 7 people to agree what color, size, and shape their patch is going to be. So you know about herding cats, right? So when you're the new guy, the first thing they tell you is, you have the patch, right? And you're like, yeah, I got the patch. So you're all excited, I'm going to make the best patch anyone's ever seen. 6 months into it, all you care about is if your name ends up on it someplace. So we got lucky, classic design here, the astronaut symbol, all our names, Endeavour, with the Kibo module for Japan, and Dexter, the large robot that we assembled in space. Just a really pretty shot of a shuttle as it rolls out, one of the last shots at night. I don't know if anyone in here, probably a few people have seen a shuttle launch. Yeah, and it's, I'm glad you did. If you haven't, it's unfortunate because it's a piece of American history and something you won't see again. Nice night shot as it rolls out. These crawlers actually were built for Apollo and modified for the shuttle. But they always reminded me of that scene in the Terminator, these giant wheel tracks. They go across this big gravel thing, and it was like a bunch of crushed skulls or something like that. It was pretty freaky the first time I saw it. And then Endeavour on the pad, getting ready for launch the day before. You can see the external tank, the solid rocket boosters, and the orbiter. Now, it's funny, when you hear the term space shuttle, everyone thinks of the orbiter. But in fact, this whole conglomeration is the space shuttle. It's called the STS Space Transportation System, comprised of the orbiter, comprised of the solid rocket boosters, the external tank, which houses liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, and then we go up and come down, and the only thing that really comes down is the orbiter. Beautiful shot, Kennedy Space Center panoramic shot of STS-123 as she lifts off. We're trying to, part of what's going on with NASA right now is we're trying to reinvigorate the space centers, figure out what our next mission is, and it looks like it's going to be commercial, teaming with SpaceX, Sierra Nevada, probably doing launches from the Kennedy Space Complex of some of the new vehicles. And a very good close-up shot I like of the shuttle. So we're up here, and that's about all the space we have. All this is payload space. You've got the 3 main engines burning. You've got the external tank and the solid rocket boosters. We'll separate from this. This burns for about a little over 8 minutes or so of the main engines. These guys, the big guys, go about 2 minutes, and then we lose them in the upper parts of the atmosphere. The solid rocket boosters are reused. The external tank isn't. It implodes, and each one is a different launch vehicle. Just a pretty shot. As we go up, you can see that the 3 main engines are burning with the solid rocket boosters. And then rendezvous and approach. So the big thing is, how do you hit a moving target? So the space station's moving pretty fast. It's about 250 nautical miles, and you just don't go up there. You have to stage. So after you get into orbit, it's a process of about 2 to 3 days of staging and catching up with the station for rendezvous. Really pretty picture from the space station crew they took of us as we come up. And this right here is one of the Soyuz Progress modules, the resupply modules with its solar panels. They're looking out straight down at us. We've got our clamshell doors open. There's the Kibo module that we talked about, and there's Dexter all compressed down, ready to be assembled. These guys are the radiators, and they open the payload bay doors. And they're very important because if you don't get these things open within about 2 hours, you're emergency deorbit. And the reason is we have a big problem with heat rejection. And you would think up there in space, you worry about being cold. Well, in fact, you have so much equipment on board and making so much heat. If you can't reject some of that via the radiators, you'll cook everything and you'll need to come down within hours or you won't come down again. Pretty picture of Endeavour. It's got the high gain radar range antenna out and the robot arm fired up and ready to go. And you can see a good picture here of the clamshells, the payload bay doors. And I like this picture also because you see, you hear about the tiles in the shuttle, they were damaged. Well, here they are. Every one of these tiles, thousands of them, each one fitted and made specifically for its size and shape. Once on board, we're in blue, and the existing space station team is in green. Russians. Garrett actually came up with us, but he was a turncoat. He switched colors on us, and he became part of the space station crew. We left him up there. Takao, myself, Peggy Whitson, who is the commander of the Increment 16 when we were there. And so part of what we were doing there was helping build the station. We were one of the last large EVA crews to go up and assemble the Japanese modules. The Japanese modules, or Kibo, are actually the largest parts of the station right now, and probably the only really scientific laboratories intact now compared to what we originally had planned. So the Japanese modules are very valuable, and we were going out to install the first one. And you can see getting ready for the EVAs. We're in our suits. Mike Foreman, myself. This is the second EVA, Bob Benkin. We have two people helping us as IVs, intravehicular, and we're the EVs. These suits weigh about 350 pounds or so. Obviously in space it's just mass, but it's impossible to get in one of these suits and set yourself up. You can't do it by yourself. You need help. And so it takes, in the process of getting ready for one EVA, about 10.5 hours. So the night before the EVA, we sleep in the airlock and we bring it down to 10.2, and we do that for physiologic reasons so we don't get bent. So we have to bleed out all the excess nitrogen, and we breathe 100% O2, and we sleep in the airlock. And the good part about that is we don't have anything to do, so we can watch movies. And I remember my last EVA, we had a copy of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and we watched that on the PC in the airlock that night. This is a great picture, not because it's of me, because it reminds me of, they yelled at me as we were going out the door. This is the main porthole on the airlock. And, you know, again, the classic scene of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where, you know, he's looking through the porthole and he realizes, Hal tells him, it's like, you don't have your helmet. And, you know, so I like this because it's like, well, I remembered my helmet. I had it on. Okay, so what's it like to do an EVA? This is me. I'm EV1 on this mission. On the previous mission, I was EV2. You'll notice that on the suits, they have different colored stripes. They're all red, but you'll have dash stripes, solid stripes, no stripes. And you wonder, well, I mean, why is that? Well, I just showed you the IV people who have to choreograph and watch us and talk to us while we're out there. Now imagine if you were one of them looking out a little window in a space shuttle and you saw these guys floating around and they're all in white suits. Who's who? You can't tell. So one of the main reasons we have this is like, oh, that's EV1, that's EV2, and you can talk to people and actually guide them around visually. Now, this is the mini workstation. We carry all our tools up here, gloves, backpack, helmet. Kids ask, you know, what's it like? So I want you to picture yourselves all to do an EVA and to train, and especially in the pool, if you're in a suit of armor with a big fishbowl over your head, and you're on roller skates, and you're wearing boxing gloves, and you had a pair of lobster tongs, and you had to change the spark plugs out on your car in the dark. That's kind of a good feeling of what it's like to be in a suit and do an EVA, especially the first time when you begin training. Okay, good picture here. We just finished the install, and this is a picture of the station. Longitudinal truss, it's the backbone, and believe it or not, the modules where we live hang off it at right angles, and all the physical hardware and plants, the solar reflectors, the radiators come off the truss. And you can see the large robot arm for the station, which is like a giant inchworm. It literally lets go and moves around, and can either end moves. And Dexter, the robot that we build, will actually go on the end of this arm. And then the install of the JEM will occur up at one of these modules, and then eventually it will be swapped by this arm to another side. Pretty intricate logistics. So here's part of the arm again. Here's the truss. That's me, I think, but I put this in here to show you that no matter where you go, you're always tethered. Any rock climbers, mountain climbers in here? I'm sure there are. So you know about tethering, you know about belaying. Everywhere we go, we've got these retractable tethers, and we actually have to move them and change positions and go. And you know, one of the big things you want to learn and do well is making sure that your tether's attached at all times. Because if you drift away, the only thing you have left is this little backpack, which I'll show you later, called a safer. It's got about 30-second supply of compressed nitrogen, and if you go tumbling away a la 2001, you can deploy a hand controller and stabilize yourself, and then you basically have to turn around and try to find the station and just blast and grab a hold of anything you can. That's never happened, and it never will, but the reason we have these tethers is for that reason. If you didn't have this backpack, literally the scary part is if you impart any force at all away from structure, you could be an inch away and you're never coming back. It's pretty not only frustrating, but pretty scary when you're up there and you realize that, I better have my tether on at all times. So what's it like to train? Well, training is underwater in a big pool in Houston called the NBL, Neutral Buoyancy Lab. And this is a picture of Dexter. Now, this is a mock-up, obviously, but the suits we're in are real. They're downgraded suits. But we are in about 40 feet of water. It simulates, 0G. The only way to do that, people ask, or kids ask, well, do you have a 0G room, an anti-gravity room? Well, I wish we did, but we have to be neutrally buoyant. So in fact, training is a lot harder than being in space for real because you have to wear giant weight packs on your legs and arms and chest to keep you buoyant in the water column. And at the same time, the suit does weigh 350 pounds. So when you're turning on your head and moving around, it tends to chew up shoulders and necks bad. So typically for one EVA, 1 hour in space, you spend about 10 hours in the suit in the pool. So you can do the math and figure out, if you're doing a 5 EVA mission, you've done a whole lot of water time before you ever got to space. Picture of Dexter. We called him Spit-em, but the Canadians don't like that because it doesn't sound right. Special Purpose Dexterous Manipulator. So we call him Dexter instead. And he's a giant robot. He kind of looks like a transformer, but he sits on the end of the arm. And he's got these 2 big arms and a head and a platform here. And the premise was he was supposed to be like an R2-D2. He was going to go out there and help us and do some of the EVA tasks that we couldn't do and save time for people so they don't have to do things like that. In fact, he's so slow that to let him try and do something could take weeks to months. So he ends up being a hood ornament. He looks cool though. And so he can actually go out and hold stuff for us, and that's about what he does now. But I tell you what, he's huge, and when you're going by him in a suit and you see like him pictured like this, it looks like there's this big robot with a gun pointing at you, and it's, you're like, man, I hope they're on our side. Okay, this is a picture of the backpack. I like this because it's a picture of me taking a picture of someone taking a picture of me, but you can see the tools, the tethers, as they snake down here, I'm tethered in, and anytime you want to do something with 2 hands, you're pretty much in a foot restraint because it's the only way that you can use both hands because, think about it, otherwise you're reacting, you're floating, you can't let go. So when we have fairly intricate stuff to do or time, it takes quite a while, we'll get in these foot restraints. But the backpack here, the safer, you can see these little jets. There's 4 of them here, up here, and this is what we'll deploy with a handle if we came unattached, disattached, and fly ourselves back. So in the airlock, not a lot of room. You can see this is right after we finished the EVA I just showed you a picture of. It takes about maybe an hour to get out of your suit. In these little whitey, tighty uniforms are actually special underwear that we wear, long underwear, with tubes all through it. So they're radiator underwear. We circulate cold water from an ice pack all across our bodies while we're in the suit. Again, you would think staying, not being cold is a big factor. In fact, overheating is a huge factor in the suit, and you could literally pass out and cook yourself if you don't have good cooling. You actually have your own temperature control dials, and you can dial it in, dial it out, and there's just a big block of ice on your back called a sublimator, and it literally sublimates off and bleeds heat off that way from the spacesuit. Pretty cool design. Okay, well, we do play, and I like this because, just like the lens of an eye, ball of water on the end of your straw. But there's Takao and I in the background. We've got some M&Ms, and this made a good picture, a science picture, reverse image, a picture of Takao and myself in that ball of water. And yeah, we can float big stuff around in space and play with things. We're not supposed to, but I won't say it hasn't been done before. People in sleep stations wake up and there's a large ball of water floating in their face. So what is it like to sleep in space? Well, picture yourselves right now, you're in these chairs, right? Remember when you were in school and you used to just kind of tilt that chair back when you get bored and you had it just at that perfect set point where you're balancing and all of a sudden it went back and you did one of these things? Well, that's what it's like to sleep in space because you're in free fall. And when you try and sleep, you're not laying down anywhere. There's no right, left, up, down, anything like that. So you have to fool your brain. You put yourself on these Velcroed down sleep mats in bags and push yourself down because your muscles tend to contract. The contractors are stronger and you'll go fetal. And some people can sleep like that, but most can't. So you'll hold your head down. You don't really turn the lights off. There's no day-night, day-night. Every 45 minutes is day-night in space. So you tend to be on meds sometimes, sleep meds. And for the first couple, 3 days, you don't sleep at all. They have these things called sleep stations, which are like little boxes or caskets that you get in for sleep studies. And you have privacy, but what you hear for the first 3 or 4 nights is just, wham, every 5 minutes, wham, bang, and someone cussing. Because what's happening is they're waking up and the brain's saying, hey, stupid, you're falling, wake up. And they go like this, and they slam their heads into the sleep stations. And so you'll hear that and you'll laugh, oh, that's pretty funny. And then 5 minutes later, bam, all of a sudden you're just like, what happened? And people are laughing at you because you do that. And it takes about, believe it or not, it takes about 2 or 3 nights for your brain to finally figure out, okay, we're not dying, and we'll let you sleep. You don't really go into REM. You don't get deep sleep for some reason. You can be very tired, even though you typically get 4 to 5 hours sleep a night if you're lucky. And when you come off a shuttle mission, you're really exhausted. Now, the station has they're much more relaxed. They give them 7 to 8 hours sleep, and there's not a lot going on, but shuttle missions are very, very intense. So part of what I got to do, I still am a veterinarian. I was a zoo veterinarian for a while at Baltimore, and I'm involved with the Mountain Gorilla Veterinary Project, and also with some people at Disney. The year we flew was the year of International Amphibian Conservation. So they stitched up Kermit in a commander suit, Disney, because they own the rights to Henson, and they sent Kermit with me, and he went up on the space station, stayed there about 2 to 3 months. He actually became Peggy's mascot. She brought him back. I left him up there. But it was good for good PR and good outreach for conservation that NASA did. Now, pretty picture. This is a composite of it. It's not a real picture. It's a bunch of things put together, but it just shows you where the population centers are, where they're clustered, and where there is populations of the world, it's mostly coastal. And now, I'm going a little bit faster, we'll talk, but this is more a little bit of a show and tell. So feel free to scream out your guesses here, but we've got some places that this is at about 250 nautical miles up, and we're taking some pictures out the window of places in the United States. And this is obviously a metropolitan area on a body of water someplace. Anybody have any ideas? And the reason I took this is you can see the massive amounts of runoff. This is after a storm, a couple days of storm, but this is all environmental runoff from metropolitan areas. Anybody have any ideas? Close, no, it's just Chicago on the Great Lakes. Very metropolitan area, as you can see. Now, if you know what you're looking at, this is easy, but if you don't know what you're looking at, it may not be. Someplace on the earth, someplace dry. These look familiar at all? These are Great Pyramids at Giza. And so you can see the pyramids. People ask, can you see the Great Wall? No, can't see the Great Wall. Tried many times. Anybody from upstate New York? Finger Lakes? There you go. Ithaca is right, I think right about there. Seneca, Ithaca, the smaller lakes in the wintertime. Beautiful shot. East Coast, Northeast. Yeah, Boston. Logan Airport, there's Boston Harbor. I'm from Boston. I'm from about an hour north of Boston, and makes for a pretty picture. But I put this in, too, because, when you're going across the earth and you're looking down, especially if you're a human and you get a pair of eyes, how do you identify cities? It's not that easy. And the Soviets are pros at this. And so the Soviet modules up there right now are old modules that they flew up there, and they tend not to let you know this or let you look, but they have huge windows. We have little tiny windows, portholes. These guys have windows that are bigger than my body, and they use them for surveillance. And these are holdovers from the old program when they didn't have satellite technology. They had cameras and people. And so one of the best ways to identify a city, it's just like a fingerprint. Every city has a different runway pattern. And so Logan and all the cities, national cities, international cities, they have them cataloged by their runway patterns. Grand Canyon from space. This is Hubble altitude, actually. This is about 350 nautical miles up. Still pretty big. What you consider Mars has Valles Marineris. It's about maybe 2/3 the size of the Earth, and Valles Marineris, I believe, is like 5 times deeper than the Grand Canyon. Gives you a little appreciation for planetary geology. Now, I stayed up about 8 hours to get this because, again, zoo vet, Used to do a lot of reptile work, and this is Santa Isabella Island in the Galapagos. Usually covered, pretty hard to get a shot of because usually a lot of coverage. But you can see nothing but big slag heaps, just volcanic caldera everywhere, which made the islands. But really the classic horse head shaped island. You know, this is Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa. And the reason I took this is, if you look really hard, you can see these little shadows here and maybe a couple little glints. Well, these are all the major observatories. We flew over one day, and we looked down, and these little things were like diamonds or glinting everywhere. And I go, what is that? And we got the 400 millimeter lens out and took this picture, and you can actually see Keck, Subaru, the European Telstar facility. They're all speckled on the top of Mauna Kea. Really pretty. West Coast. Any Navy guys, Navy people, Navy ladies? This is San Diego. So, right here is about Mexico. Silver Strand. This is North Station. The field airport is undercover here, but this is Point Loma. This is Shelter Island. Maybe you're familiar. Coronado, and there's the bridge, the Coronado Bridge from Simon versus Simon. And as you come out here in Point Loma, if you look in, there's a submarine base. We actually could, probably not supposed to say this, we could actually see submarines in the docks at the base that day, and we took this picture. And I was involved with the U.S. Navy's Marine Mammal Program, and you could actually see all the pens right there where the animals were stationed in San Diego. Just a really good picture. Everyone knows this. Looks a lot more peaceful from space than it is on the ground. It's the Mideast, and this is taken at Hubble altitude. Again, really clear day, unusual, even though it's dry, to get this kind of clarity with the Red Sea, the Straits, Hormuz, Isthmus. And this is just a time-delayed picture of the Aurora Australis, which is the southern lights. I grew up pretty much north, so I could go out in the wintertime and see the northern lights. They usually came in as reds or whites or sometimes blues, but for some reason the southern lights, the Australis, always comes in as this dark, deep chartreuse color. And I really don't know why, but this is a time lapse that Takao took, and you got a good shot of it. Finally, any ideas? Well, you are, I think, here. It's New Orleans. Picture of New Orleans from the station with sunglint. It came up pretty. And then to show you, again, New Orleans. Great picture. It shows what a delta is and what it does, and how clear actually the Gulf can be, depending on what's coming down the tube, so to speak. And New Orleans at night. Probably French Quarter's in there someplace. I don't know where. And unfortunately, another picture of New Orleans. We all know this is Katrina. This is taken from a satellite, a NOAA satellite, hours literally before it hit. Northeast, metropolitan area, Manhattan, and unfortunately, another picture taken literally hours after 9/11 from the station. You can see from the devastation of the Twin Towers there, what happened. Okay, so let's go into Hubble. Third mission was Hubble, and we upgraded all the systems, put new arrays on it, new cameras. We were the mission that was before the last mission. We were supposed to be the last mission, and they had to run more. But I like this picture just because it shows Hubble already captured on the back of Columbia on a big turntable. Here's the rear end of Columbia, and you right now are looking from the front end of Columbia down the tube at Hubble, and we're putting in new arrays. But I took this picture mainly because every sun set for about 10 seconds, the lower wavelengths came in, the reds and golds, and it would light everything up in this intense gold. It was beautiful, and it would only last for 5 or 6 seconds, and I just wanted a picture of it. New arrays on Hubble, they're about 25% smaller, provide about 25% more power, and they unfold, unlike the old ones which rolled in and out that were Mylar screens. Picture of John Grunsfeld, EV1 here, myself EV2, no stripes on the end of the arm. You can see I've got a pistol grip tool here. Everything we do is with this giant Makita power tool. They're all all bolts that drive, and that's how you interact with everything. Everything's designed that way, and these have huge batteries in them, and they're designed to last about 6 to 7 hours before they need a recharge. Good picture of the NICMOS installation. NICMOS was a camera, near-infrared camera for multi-object spectroscopy. That's hard to say. But what happened is when we launched it, it's a very expensive camera, and it needed to be cooled down because it looks at things in the infrared, just like your CCDs on your cameras. It had a large block of liquid nitrogen that was meant to cool it. There was a short circuit, and the stuff evaporated. So it had no way to cool down the CCDs, so the camera was dead, brand new. So they had to figure out, how can we fix this? Well, here's a plug for human ingenuity and why humans need to be in space and not sending up machines. There's a really smart company called Creari in New Hampshire, and they came up with a way to make a radiator that hangs in the outside of Hubble using something called reverse Brayton cycle technology, which sprayed liquid argon on a rotating drum at like 30,000 RPM, and over a course of 2 months, literally brought the temperatures back down. And we were able to get pictures and bring the camera back to life again. And for the first time, Hubble actually looks different now because I hung a huge radiator on the outside of it. That's me. I actually go inside and plumb the radiator inside up underneath with tubes and all that. And this is John on the end of the arm. He looks like a big mantis or something, bringing that radiator around. So first pictures to come back. Beautiful picture. This is from NICMOS. It's infrared, and the amazing thing is, you can see the moons. Beautiful picture of Saturn and the ring system. Well, everybody used to think, when I grew up, it's like who had rings? Saturn had rings. But in fact, we have 4 planets in our system that have rings. We just couldn't see them before because we didn't have the optical technology. Uranus, which is tilted actually on its axis compared to the other planets, 90 degrees, has a pretty prominent ring system. This is a picture of Neptune taken, believe it or not, by Voyager a long time ago. Can't see the ring system here, unfortunately, but it's there. But a really pretty picture of gas giants and Jupiter. This is a picture of Shoemaker-Levy. Many people remember Shoemaker-Levy, 10, 15 years ago now. Comet that broke up and impacted Jupiter. Well, I put all this in here to show you the gas giants because it's good that we live in a solar system that has a lot of big gas giants in the periphery because they act as gravity wells and sinks. And so the theory is now, if you're looking at new planets for life, evolved life, that you better be looking in systems that have big giant gas giants and Goldilocks planets close to a sun, because what happens is they tend to take the hits. And this planet's been hit at least once, probably twice or more, and we have reboots each time. So you can only take so many reboots before life just doesn't come back. So Jupiter took the hit with Shoemaker-Levy, and it's good that it did. This is just an animation of going down into the southern hemisphere as they break apart. I'll show you some things here in a minute that show some of the impact sites on Jupiter in infrared. But one piece of this was estimated to be about 250,000 Hiroshimas. So one hit of that magnitude for this planet, we wouldn't be here today. We would maybe be intelligent cockroaches in 5 or 6 million years. Here's a good picture of one of the first impacts. That right here is about 5 times the diameter of the Earth in the upper atmosphere of Jupiter. Here's the large impact before. Again, some ridiculous amount of energy, but again, this is much wider than the entire diameter of the Earth. And so you don't want to have stuff like this hit us. Great picture of planet Mars, and I put this in because it has polar caps. Probably had life at some point, probably still does, I think, but very, very small, microscopic life. But we talked about impacts. There's another theory now, too, by the way, that that the Earth at one point had 2 moons, and now it only has 1. That the Earth took a huge impact from its smaller moon and basically congealed back again. And why does Mars have no atmosphere? It barely has an atmosphere. It's got enough gravity to have one. Why doesn't it have water anymore? Well, if you look at the planet, the northern hemisphere is pretty much very smooth like glass, much less rocky or cratered than the moon. Southern hemisphere's got a whole lot of damage. It's got Valles Marineris. It's got Olympus Mons. It's pockmarked everywhere. So the theory is that, hey, there's a good chance that the reason Mars doesn't have water in an atmosphere now is because it took a huge impact. which basically slagged the planet and remelted the whole top half of the atmosphere, of the hemisphere. And in the process, ejected the atmosphere and most of the water, most of the atmospheric water. And so, you know, again, a good reason why we need to learn how to colonize other places and get off the planet at some point, because we're going to need to. And I like this shot just because this is a picture of Mars, and this is a real-time shot taken by a Mars surveyor in orbit, and just by chance, it looked down and said, hey, what is that? It got a real-time landslide on Mars at the polar cap. I mean, you're looking at another planet, a geologic event, caught real-time on another planet, which I thought was pretty amazing. And then, you know, this could be Death Valley, this could be the Sahara, but this is Mars. So when you look at things like this, what does it look like? Well, it looks like this, Betsy Boca. I mean, there's almost no question that there was running water on the planet at some point. And with water comes life. Now, this is the original Hubble Deep Field. Many of you might be familiar with this. There's a funny story here. You can see there's a chunk out of here, and everybody used to think, oh, well, that's some scientific reason, and there's you know, the instrument was like that. And in fact, what happened was they didn't have enough money to buy more CCD plates. They ran out of money, so that's why the original camera has this chunk out of it. But this picture is famous because this was taken on like a 12-night exposure, I think out in space in the sky near Vega, in an area that people said there's nothing there, don't waste time. And other people said, no, we think there is stuff there and we want to take pictures, we want to see what we get. So there's this big argument. They finally let them do a 12-night exposure on this one point, and if you hold your thumbs up, it's about half the size of your thumbnail, this point that you're looking at as you point at Hubble. And this is what came back. In a space where, you know, nothing is, where you can look out and see the Milky Way, you see, you know, there's mass everywhere, matter there. Well, this plate had nothing. And in fact, this is what we got back. And so I asked people, when you look at this, how many stars do you see in this picture? How many would you think are in this picture? Well, it's a trick question. There's only 3 stars in this picture. That's one there, that's one there, and I don't know where the other one is. Can't find it. Everything else is a galaxy. Okay, so in the space of your thumb, less than your thumb, in a part of the sky where nothing was supposed to be, there's over 6,000 galaxies. And if you consider there's 100 billion stars in each galaxy, and you do the step-down math, if you just consider 1% of those stars are habitable stars, 1% of those have habitable planets, you still come out with an astronomical number of possibilities for life. So the question then becomes, it's like people ask, well, do you think there's life out there? And when you look at this and think about it, how can you say, do you think there isn't? It's almost astronomically impossible that there isn't. So one of the first pictures from the last mission when we were up there, all the mice, and I put this in here because our closest neighbor is Andromeda. It's a little bit bigger than the Milky Way, and we are on a collision course too. 2 galaxies are going to collide probably 4 to 5 billion years, so we don't have to worry about it. Probably nothing's going to hit because the space is so immense that stars and planets won't even contact each other. We won't know. But the galaxies themselves are going to undergo gravitational stresses and reform themselves. And they think that's how galaxies evolve, just like everything else evolves. Well, that didn't work. So this is computer generation. Could be Andromeda, could be us. And this is what happens with gravitational stresses as spiral galaxies become globular galaxies, become clusters, and become giant supergalaxies. And this is what's similar on a smaller scale in the middle of the Milky Way, in the middle of this galaxy and of Andromeda. So it's a bit long, but the reason I like it is because it shows real pictures, computer simulations here, and then real actual pictures taken by Hubble, which pretty much prove that this is the real thing. This is what's happening. So you are there someplace. Anyway, it's pretty amazing. So they call this the mice just because you have these long gravitational swept out tails of planets and stars, and they look like mice. One of the first pictures to come back from the new cameras. This is M16, Eagle Nebula. All these little pink dots are stars being born in gas clouds in nebula. And you can see this one's gone main sequence and ignited, and it sculpts out the cloud. The solar winds just push back all the debris and the dust, and from this debris and dust, planets will eventually form. And so we've got new stars being formed from this process, and as they age and mature, what happens? They become, let's go back. They become old stars. And this is what's left of an old star right there, that blue point. And this is the Orion Nebula, but this is an exploded supernova. And this is probably, I think, 100 light years across. And everything we're made of, our planet, everything that's in us, was forged in supernova, in a stellar furnace. All the heavy elements, everything is forged in the sun, and that's the way things evolve and new planets and new stars are formed. These supernovas blow, and you don't want to be around them when they go because they take everything out, but they also seed the universe with the building blocks that we need for life. I'll get it. Now this, believe it or not, is a fly-through of that Orion Nebula, and it's taken its real data from Hubble that's been computer turned into CGI. This is what it really looks like if you could fly through it. You can see all these stars that are being formed have shock waves around them from the solar winds and the gas clouds that are being eroded away. And at the center of this is probably a large black hole, just like at the center of our galaxy. And around this black hole and around these planetesimals, you're going to start having debris form, which will eventually become planetary systems. Good animation, all from Hubble data. And coming back in, re-entry, beautiful shot. This is the last flight of the space shuttle as it re-enters, taken from the space station. You can see as it's starting its 4,000-mile track and starting to re-enter and hit the atmosphere, plasma trail as it goes into land. See some of actually the station. That's actually Mr. Dexter that we built, sitting out there right now. And last shot, Columbia landing, STS-109. We were unfortunately the last intact mission. The last Hubble mission on Columbia was the last intact mission. And we know what happened to Columbia. Unfortunately, the first historical record of a manned spacecraft entering and crashing was unfortunately one of ours. This is a picture of the breakup over Texas and Louisiana, and looped footage of why that happened. If you look up here, the external tank, you'll see a chunk of foam come down and impact the left wing. And you know, that was like, oh, well, it's no big deal. Well, it was a huge deal. It put a hole in the wing, you know, the size of your head or more. It was big. And what happened is, unfortunately, that when they came in and you just saw that plasma trail, the wing was blowtorched off internally, so they lost their left wing, and then that's what caused the breakup. So should we stop because of that? You know, should we stop exploring? It's like, it's not safe, right? Let's not do that. Well, that's the general concern, and that was what a lot of people said. But let's face it, I mean, we wouldn't be sitting right here now if we didn't have people in Europe who did exploration. You know, I mean, it's the natural way of our species to explore. And sure, things are risky, but let's face it, if you don't take risks, you don't get anything out of it. You have to take risks. The key is how to do the risk management and make it as safe as possible. And I like this picture because this is Gus Grissom, and this is Liberty Bell. And again, going back to the right stuff, if any of you remember that movie, I keep thinking, you know, everyone's my age, but they're not. There's a lot of young people there. It's a great movie, but historically, he lost his capsule. His capsule sunk when they tried to retrieve it. And he was blamed for years. And in the movie, they call him, he screwed the pooch. And, you know, she didn't get to meet Jackie, his wife, and she was all, because he blew the hatch. He was a hatch blower. And so for years, he said, I did not blow the hatch. And, you know, they lost the capsule and they recovered. They almost got pulled down in the helicopter when they tried to pull it out, and it sunk. And believe it or not, like a few years ago off the coast in the Bahamas, they found Liberty Bell 7. And when they went down, and Gus Grissom had been dead for years because he died in the Apollo fire with Ed White and Chaffee. But you know, he went back in, and sure, they went in and checked the mechanism, and he hadn't touched it. The thing had blown by itself, probably from saltwater short. So vindicated years after his death. So where do we go from here, or what do we do? I mean, classic movie, I keep bringing it up, it's one of my favorite movies, 2001. Will we go that way, where we kind of sit back on our hands and kind of, you know, see what happens and take it safe. Well, again, you can see there are reasons for humans leaving space and traveling, not only the exploration, but for safety, because at some point in our future, we will have to get people off the planet. Classic shot here, just of the first moon landing. Anybody know who this is? Well, that's Buzz Aldrin. And if you look really hard in his goggles, you'll see a little white spot here. And that's Armstrong. Guess what? There aren't any pictures of Neil, just pictures of Buzz. So Neil took pictures of Buzz, but when you go back, it's like I think Buzz was mad, so he was the second guy. So Neil didn't get a whole lot of shots. This is a great picture of the lunar module, the lander, and them walking on the moon for the first time. And of course, I asked the guy today, the IT guy, I go, okay, so some people get this, because, you know, there's probably people here who are a little too young, and they're like, yeah, that's kind of funny, but what is that? So if you remember the honeymooners, and I was young for that too, but my grandfather watched it all the time. My sister sent me this last year. To the moon, Alice, pow. I know I probably talked longer than I should have and taken too much time, and I appreciate everyone coming, and just want to push the One Health word and get out there, and, you know, there's small animals, large animals, lab animals, but there's so much more out there that our profession's good at and can do better than anybody else. And so you're the guys, young people especially in the audience, that are going to be doing all that. So thank you.